Good morning, everyone. I hope your day started off really well. Today I am talking about Lydia. And so Lydia is a 54-year-old single mum of 2 teenage children. She's a researcher. She feels exhausted all the time. Plus she has chronic diarrhea. So I'm Ange Sinclair and I'm the digestive detective. And Lydia was certainly an interesting case, as she had lots going on and she was super committed to getting to the bottom of the issues, which in my opinion is always makes a really great difference to people. My hair's gone a bit of its own way this morning, so apologies for that. So Lydia was overweight. She was really fatigued that she found it a struggle to get out of bed in the morning, and not just on work days, every day. So you ever had that? She was going to bed at 9 o'clock, or she'd be sitting on the lounge chatting to her kids and she'd fall asleep. So she was pretty fatigued. And even though she was sleeping all night, say from 9 o'clock till 6 or 7 when she had to get up, she was still feeling really exhausted. So she was overweight and she knew that, and she had been trying the keto diet for a few weeks, and her diarrhea was worse than ever. Her weight was still creeping up. In her words, she felt like a frumpy, tired old woman, which is not a really good place to be. So because Lydia had diarrhea for some time, I suggested that she get a stool test from Microba, which gives us a really good indication internally what's going on for her. I also suggested she go along to the doctor because it had been a really long time since she had been to the doctors, years in fact. So just to get a bloods check, to get some iron, and all the usual suspects of vitamin D, a full cholesterol panel, a full iron panel, a full blood count, her B12 and a folate, and a PCR test to make sure she hadn't picked up a parasite. So I often hear people say, well, I couldn't have a parasite because I haven't traveled anywhere. You don't need to travel anywhere to pick up a parasite. You can pick them up in your capital city or in your rural area. I also got it to test for celiac disease. Now, her sister is a celiac, and Lydia had never had gut symptoms, so she just assumed that she couldn't be celiac. So something I urge people is, just because you don't have gut symptoms doesn't mean you necessarily can't be celiac. So some of the other symptoms that you'll get that aren't GIT related are things like osteoporosis, fatigue, mouth ulcers, problems with your period, osteopenia. You could be depressed or anxious. You get a tingling in your hands and your feet, or joint pain. Just to name a few. So they're also things that could be going on for you if you have celiac disease. So my recommendation is, before you cut out gluten out of your diet, is to get tested for celiac disease. There are a lot of people walking around as undiagnosed celiacs. So I would suggest that you do that test before you even think about cutting out gluten, because you have to be on gluten for a fair amount of time to get a positive result if you have a biopsy and stuff. So just always, I recommend that you get tested before you start cutting it out. So after a round of tests, we got her stool test back, and it was clear to see that Lydia was not looking after her own health. When we did her food, mood and poo journal, Lydia was missing a couple of meals a day, and so she would get so busy she would forget to eat, and she would get home from work and look after her teens, and then she was so exhausted she would go to bed. And so she was doing this a lot more than she actually thought she was. So that's the great thing about writing things down. Sometimes things pop up that you don't otherwise see. So the great thing about getting a Microba test is that it gives you a pretty good indication of what the person sitting in front of me is eating. As the weight had started to creep up for Lydia, she had tried intermittent fasting, the paleo diet, and the latest thing she was doing was the keto diet. So the Microba test really highlighted that she was at risk of disease due to the fat content. So we have bacteria that prefers not to be with the fat. We take all the fat, you get a subset of bacteria that are high hydrogen sulfide bacteria. They are undesirable to have lots of them in the gut, and her stool test was showing us that that was happening for her. The blood test also indicated that her gallbladder was in pretty bad shape, and it wasn't particularly happy with all the fat that she was giving it either. So one thing I know for sure, when people have tried all these diets and they're not having any success with them long term, as they're really hard diets to maintain over a longer period of time. I also find that people do these diets in such a restrictive way that they unnecessarily restrict fiber from their diets. So our gut bacteria needs fiber to survive and thrive. So, you know, it's interesting to see that the correlation of this starvation of the gut bacteria in the microbiota test. So I really always am quite surprised when I see how much that fiber does impact when you get these tests back. So while her diet was really high in fat, it was really low in carbohydrates. So her energy was being impacted as this as well. As when we eat carbohydrates, we turn that carbohydrate into sugar, which gets used as energy. And if you don't use it as energy, it gets stored as fat. And what was really interesting with Lydia is that she wasn't drinking any liquid at all except for tea. And so this was giving her the boost she was needed. Have you ever done that when you've been really tired? You try and boost yourself up with hot chips or a cup of coffee or things like that. So she was doing this quite a lot. So tea can be problematic on several fronts. So if you choose to have it around meal times, it impedes your iron absorption and can lead to fatigue as well, because it's a diuretic, and so it can dehydrate you if that's all you're drinking. So you can see there's a couple of fronts that Lydia was causing her fatigue. So one of the biggest reasons for fatigue is dehydration. So if you're dehydrated, you are likely to be more fatigued than normal. For Lydia's treatment plan, we put in a plan of action to get in more water in a diet, for her to enlist her teenage children to help her with dinners of a night time, to make extra so that the next day she could take that as leftovers and she wouldn't have to think about it. We changed her diet from a keto diet to a whole food diet. And for Lydia, this gave her gallbladder a bit of a break from having to constantly break down the fats. And not surprising, her diarrhea cleared up really quickly within a couple of days. So we added a nice mix of fat, fiber and protein into her diet to every meal instead of just, being hit and miss. And we made a pact that she would eat those meals regardless of how busy she was. She had to, set some time aside. So how did she reprogram herself to do this? Because this is the hardest part for many. It's really not as easy as it sounds it is. So she set up timers, and she was the queen of the timer. She set up timers on her phone for all her meals. She got the water app. She scheduled her toilet breaks and some mental health breaks during the day. So she set this all up on her phone. And so the last time I saw Lydia, she told me that her fatigue had gone from a 12 out of 10 to now only a 3 on a bad day. She was really in a good space with her work schedule, and her kids had really stepped up to help mum and give her a break. And not always, but she said most of the time they were really helpful. So she was looking at doing exercise after work a few nights a week because her kids had now taken on some of the extra workload at home, and she was no longer exhausted and falling into bed or falling asleep on the lounge. So that was a really good improvement. She told me she was starting to feel like a new improved version of herself, which is a really great thing for me to hear as a practitioner. So if you're having trouble with diarrhea or fatigue, book in for a 15-minute consult, and together we can work out an action plan for you to take you from being exhausted and frazzled into enjoying your life again. For those of you on Insta, the link is in the bio, and for the Facebook, the link is under the heading, and for LinkedIn, the link will be in the comments. So have a fantastic day, everybody. I look forward to chatting to you. If you're in Love Your Guts, we'll be in there tomorrow talking with Selena Tonkin about tapping and how that can help you with weight loss and improve your gut and all those sorts of things. So if you're not a member, come on over and join it into the group. So it's Digestive Detective Love Your Guts. See you then. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.